Hi guys, welcome back. For those of you who are new here, I'm Johnny Chivers. I'm a data engineer with over 10 years experience working primarily Monday to Friday in AWS. And in today's video, we're going to take a look at AWS Glue Studio. Full disclosure, there are other videos on YouTube, including some from AWS that cover Glue Studio already. But you guys and me thought that they actually didn't give enough information to get you going from scratch. And that's what we're going to do today. We're actually going to configure a complete environment from scratch, including using sample data that I'm providing. This will involve things outside of Glue Studio, but don't worry if you're brand new to Glue. I'm going to take you through everything step by step. And there's more videos on this channel that will explain the configuration steps in depth if you want to know more. Glue Studio itself is a visual offering from AWS that attempts to open the ETL ecosystem of AWS Glue to people who can't write Spark code or just want to operate in a low-code environment. And it does this through a GUI that lets us add components or nodes as they're known to a workflow, and this creates the code in the background. As I said, I'm not going to go into heavy theory detail on Glue Studio. I think AWS have that already covered themselves, and I'll leave a link below in the description to one of their videos. What I'm going to do is get us started from scratch with Glue Studio. So let's jump onto the console, let's get things configured, and let's get Glue Studio underway. Okay guys, that's me logged into the console. So the first thing we need to do is a little bit of setup work so we have some data to use Glue Studio with. We will be using S3 buckets and we will be using other elements of Glue outside of the studio. Just follow along. I'm not going to go in depth as I do this. There are other videos on the channel that cover the Glue service and the elements we're going to use in depth now. I'll put a link. Actually, the data engineering course is really good for that. But today we're just focusing on Glue Studio. So let's just get through the setup work and then we can take a look at Glue Studio itself so you can all follow along at home. So the first thing we need to do is navigate to S3 by typing in S3 at the navigation menu and clicking on it. I'm just opening it up in a new window so it's easy to follow along. Once on S3, you need to create a new bucket. So create bucket on right hand side and then give the bucket a name that you will remember. It has to be unique within the entirety of AWS. I'm just going to give it my name because I find it easier to make that unique because there's not many people have my name obviously, and then I'm going to put demo at the end. I'm going to work out of London. It doesn't really matter what region you're working out of, and then create the bucket. Okay, once the bucket's created, go into it, and once we're on the main directory of the bucket, we need to create a couple of folders. So we go create folder and we'll call the first one input and hit create folder. We need to create another folder on the same level and we'll call this one output. And we'll want to create that folder. If we go into output, we want to create another couple of directories here. 3 in total will do the trick. So we want to create one and we'll just call this output_1 and create that folder. And then we'll do the same again and call it 2. So output_2. Oh, typo. Perfect. And we'll do another one, create folder, and we'll call this one output_3 this time. So you should have 3 folders then, 1, 2, 3 inside that output directory. If we just go back up one level onto the top level of the bucket, and we go to the input directory, we want to create a folder here called customers. So customers and create that folder. So input has customers and we want to click into that folder. And this directory is going to be used to host the data that we'll use as our input source. The data itself is available on GitHub. So there's a link in the description below. If you go onto the GitHub, it's the customer.csv file. You just want to go code and download zip, and that will download the entire zip file locally. Unzip that folder and have it ready to go. Once you have it unzipped, you click upload and you want to add a file. And you want to go to the unzipped version and you want to go to the customer.csv. You want to hit open and then you want to hit upload. And that will upload the file of customer data into our S3 folder. So if we hit close, it's there now. Okay, the next step is to actually register this inside the Glue data catalog so we can use it with Glue Studio. As I said at the start of the video, this is outside the scope of what I'm going to cover today in terms of the theory and in depth. So just follow along to get it set up. And if you want to have a look at the other Glue videos on the channel to understand what's going on, feel free to check those out once you've completed this video. To do this as well, we need an IAM service role to use with Glue. So the first thing we're going to do is set up that role. It's something that is missing out of other tutorials on Glue Studio, but I'll show you how to do it. I will provision, as usual, too many permissions for that role. I find it easier when doing the tutorials to give them too many permissions, so not worrying about permission boundaries when we're trying to follow along at home in the purposes of a tutorial. Of course, as this is a real environment, you need to narrow down those permissions. So we just go into role, create role, as I did on screen there. You want to go to Glue, click Glue and next permissions. So that means we're provisioning permissions to Glue. I will give it admin access. Bad practice, as I said, but easier to follow along with. So just give yours admin access as well and delete it once you're done. I'll call this role Glue Studio, just so we know what it is. And I'm also just going to put delete on the end so I actually know to go back and delete that role. So Glue Studio -delete and create the role. That is the role created. The next thing we want to do is go to Glue. So type in Glue at the top and navigate yourself to Glue. We'll not go into the Glue Studio element first. We'll leave that on the left-hand side here. We actually need to set up some data for it. As I said, outside the scope of the video, but if you follow along, we'll have some data to use in Glue Studio. So we want to click on database and we want to add a database. I'm just going to call this database test. It's a great one to have. Then we want to go into crawlers, which is on the left-hand side. These are things that will scan over that S3 location with the folder of customers and then give us a table of that data at a high level. Plenty of videos, as I said on the channel, of what this is actually doing. So I'm just going to call it test crawler. Feel free to call yours the same at home. Hit next. Leave these as the default. Hit next. This is all fine. Down here, we want to go to the include path and you want to hit the folder and you want to find the S3 bucket that we started with. You want to go to the input folder. You want to go to customers and you want to actually click on the .csv file itself. Hit create and go next. Add another data store. The answer is no, so hit next. IAM role, you want to choose an existing, hit the refresh icon just in case, and find the one that we just created. So mine was called Glue Studio. Delete, and hit next. Run on demand is fine, hit next. Database is test, which is the one we just created, so hit test. And just for clarity, I'm going to put input underscore. So this means when it finds the customer table, it's going to append input underscore to the name. That's everything. Hit finish then. Once you get onto this kind of review steps, everything should be fine. Test crawler S3. This is my S3 bucket. Everything else is good. Once ready to go, hit the little checkbox at the left-hand side, and hit run crawler. This will take about a minute. It's going to run out the S3. It's going to run over our data and then bring us back the schema that it finds. I'll pause the video here and then we'll pick it up once it's ready to go. Okay, after a minute, you'll see that you've got one table added. Just make sure you keep clicking that refresh icon on the top right there, as it doesn't always refresh itself automatically. We'll take a quick look at the table and we'll do this the long way. So you want to go databases, you want to go test, you want to go tables in test down here is a little hyperlink. You'll see that it found the table and it's appended input underscore as we asked. Click on that and you'll see that it's actually then got the rows and the columns that we expected. And there's 998 rows in there. Perfect. That's half the battle done for us by the AWS Glue crawler. Now we're ready to take a look at Glue Studio. Left hand side under ETL, you'll see AWS Glue Studio and it's currently marked with a new. We're going to cover three things. We're going to do a workflow that's pre-populated. We're going to look at a custom workflow, and then we're going to look at a custom workflow with a transformation. The idea is that all three of these hopefully will give you a good idea on how to get to go with Glue Studio. There are 3 videos on the right-hand side by AWS. The last one is streaming. I will cover streaming in a different video. I just think it's too in-depth a topic to do it justice here. I will cover things that are missed out on the AWS videos. One of them is the creation of an IAM role that can work with Glue Studio. We just did that. And the other thing is that they actually don't show you how to use data and populate your own data. So because we've created that S3 bucket and now have data in the Glue data catalog, we can actually do our own tutorial at home, which you can't do when you follow the official videos. They're very good. They explain a lot of things about Glue ETL and Glue Studio that I am not going to cover in the tutorial in terms of like a theory and where it came from and why Glue Studio exists. I'm more just going to do the things in Glue Studio and show you around. As you can see, you have a couple of different options when you first land on the page. You have manage and create jobs down here. You've run jobs and monitor jobs, and you've connect external data sources. We already have our data, but if you were going from like your on-premise database, this is where you go and you'd set up a JDBC connection. But we have our data ready to go, so we're grand. If you hit the little hamburger menu on the left-hand side, this is kind of like the control panel of what goes on. So as you see, we have jobs, which are what we're going to create in Glue Studio. You create a job and it has a workflow and a workspace that you can create in a visual concept. That's the idea behind Glue Studio. It's creating jobs using visual elements rather than coding. If you have no code experience or you prefer low code and you're just getting into Glue, this is where the jobs come in. This is where we can create jobs without having to code. Monitoring is exactly what it says on the tin. It's where you monitor. And connectors, as I explained, is where you would connect databases or other things that you own. It's a pretty straightforward process. The marketplace has connectors for things like Snowflake, or you can create your own kind of custom connector as well. And just as an FYI, there are links out to the Glue console where we were before. The catalog is where the table resides, and the crawlers are the things we use to populate the data in the Glue data catalog. So without further ado, let's go to jobs. And the first thing we want to do is a visual with a source and target. So this is the simplest thing we can do, and it's a great one to get started with. So hit create, and you'll land on this AWS Glue Studio workflow workspace type thing. So a couple of things to point out before we get started. You have your job name at the top that you can change yourself. So I put in test. The visual, which we'll come back to, is where we actually build the data flow and we don't have to code anything. There's a load of different elements built in for us. The script, if you are interested, because you can download it and edit it, is located here. So this is the actual code that the workflow on the other side of the tab, on the visual tab, is creating. And then the job details, which we'll come back to fill in, is actually the job details. This is what it's going to use to run the code. But for now, let's take a little look at the actual plane. So AWS Glue Studio is based on nodes. So these are nodes. And nodes are elements of things we want to do. You have three types. You have a source node, which is the one at the top. You have a transform node, which is the one in the middle, in this example. And you have a target node, which is the one at the bottom. You can have multiple source nodes, you can have multiple target nodes, and you can have multiple transform nodes. But today, we're going to start with the simplest one, which is the one you see on screen. The second one, we'll do a custom one where I'll show you nodes that we can bring in. And then the third one we'll actually do is the most in-depth. Looking at the workflow right now, this is our actual source. So our source is an S3 bucket. Our source properties, we go to the left-hand side here, is a data catalog table. You want to find the database test and you want to choose the table in input customers CSV. If you click the output schema, it shows you the schema that's coming from our source. So you remember looking at that in the Glue data catalog? Well, there it is now here. There is data preview. You do need to turn it on, but I'm not going to have it on for the purpose of this lesson. Node properties, if you are interested, is where you can change the name. So we could change this to source data, for example. And you'll see over on the left-hand side, the node has now changed name. The other thing to know about node properties is that you have your node type for source. And when you go further down, like onto this node, which is the transform node, where we have a whole selection here. When you have a transform node and you go into node properties, you actually have to select the parent. And the parent is the thing that is sending the data to the child. So in this example, the source is the parent, the transform is the child. In the one below, the S3 bucket, which is the target, is the child. And the mapping, this node, the transform node, is the parent. And there's no tool on AWS Glue that I kind of click and draw the arrows. It's done by the node properties. So for example, if I was to delete the source data node parent, that line disappears. And if I want to add it back in, you simply click in, tick the one you want to be the parent, and then it actually makes the line appear for you, the arrow appear for you again. That's the question I get asked the most about Glue Studio is how do I actually create these relationships? Because most people and other ETL editors are used to kind of clicking and dragging arrows. With Glue Studio, it's as simple as going into node properties and then working with node parents, the thing that you want to be the parent, the thing you want to be the child. Okay, that's enough rambling about nodes and parents and child. Let's take a look at the transform. So as I said, this is coming from the transform. We will do a custom transform at the end in the very final lesson where I'll show you how to actually input some of the code of your own. The next one we'll do a wee quick join because everyone needs to join their data. But for now, just know that they're all sitting here. You add them onto the canvas and you set up the nodes for yourself. And you can see that the automatic one out of the box is an apply mapping. And this is where you can actually change the data type and the actual name of the column on the way out. So I could call that one customer ID. I could call that one name underscore style. I could call that one title customer. And that is actually transforming, the names of the data as it comes down to the target. Because if you look at output customer here, when we go to the child node, you can see that those names have changed. Whilst if I was to go back and I change that now to customer ID, for example, then click on this one, go to the output schema, you can see it's back to customer ID. So play around with the different naming types, see how it works for you, and then you can see exactly what's going on. So, if I change that to the first underscore name, I go there and I go to output schema, you'll see that it's now first underscore name. This last node, although we've already been on it looking at the output schema, is actually the target nodes. As I said, you can have multiple targets and it automatically connects into things like Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, Postgres, MySQL, Redshift, AWS S3, and anything you have in your Glue data catalog. For the purposes of this demo, let's leave it as JSON, so you can select different format types. Of course, the ORC and Parquet are there, but I'm going to leave it in JSON. And then you need to select a target destination. So I've got an S3 target bucket as by the node properties, and I need to select a destination. Funny enough, we already created our destination. So if you go into the bucket that we had before, we go to output and we go to output 1, which actually I always find confusing. You have to just hit the radio button on the folder rather than clicking into it. Last thing we'll do is rename this because it's good practice, and we'll call this target S3. And you can see that the name has changed down the bottom. Last thing we need to do is go into job details. This is where you can also change the name as set at the top. So you can change it up here and then it will actually change it down there and vice versa. If I was to change it back to that lowercase, it will then change it at the top. You can add a description. So, this is a Glue job, for example. The most critical thing is an IAM role. You actually want the one that we created earlier. This gives the job the permissions it needs to run. So this is critical. It is missing out of other demos. This is where you set the IAM role that's going to actually have the permissions to run the job. I won't go into too in depth about what all this is, but simply we're going to run a Spark engine. To keep the cost down to a couple of cents, change this 10 to 2. Again, I'm not going to go into depth on what this doing, but basically it's provisioning less resources, so it's cheaper for us because we're only working with less than 1,000 rows. And then number of retries, set that to 1. We don't want the job to retry. And then most importantly, hit save. We need to save everything, obviously, so make sure you hit save. It's creating the job, it's doing some stuff. So that one's actually fine because I actually own the bucket. So if I click save again, it'll actually run through it and it'll go green this time. So if you see that error the first time, just hit it again and it will actually save it. Some random message that comes up basically saying you already own the bucket that the data's in. If you hit run, the job will successfully start. And this is where the monitoring comes in. Go to monitoring and you'll see that actually nothing's happened. Actually, something is happening, and this is another thing in Glue Studio that happens. Some of the UI doesn't update automatically at times, so just hard refresh your browser. Just refresh your complete browser. Oh, and look at that, we're off and running. So that's something I learned the hard way. I was looking around for hours the first time I used Glue Studio. Where's my jobs? And I found out just hard refresh the browser, whatever way you want, and then things start to appear. You can see that it's blue and it's off and running, and you get some details about the running job down the bottom. You get the status and you get actually the capacity and the worker type. This job will take about 2 minutes to run, so I'm going to pause the video. And what we want to see by hard refreshing the browser occasionally is this blue change to green. So it'll go from blue to green. And that's what we want. We want it to be successful. And then I'll pick the video up once we've got that job successful. Okay, so again, I did just have to keep hard refreshing every 30 seconds and eventually it went to successful. If you click on the success at the top there, just to show you what I did, I hit that little one. It gives you some information about the job and why it was successful. If you want to take a quick look at this data, there was a reason I deliberately selected JSON. If you go back into the S3 bucket, you go back up a directory to the output folder, click in the output, click in the output one, highlight the file, go to actions, go to query with S3 select it as JSON, leave everything else as default and run SQL query. And you'll see if you scroll down the bottom, we got our rows back. There are other ways to look at this data, including using Athena. Again, videos on this channel on how to do it, but for the purposes of just getting to grips with Glue Studio, this is good enough to have a look. Perfect. So the next thing I want to show in Glue Studio is a different sort of job, and that's where we actually make one ourselves, where we author the job from scratch rather than that wizard putting the 3 nodes on for us. And we'll do a join this time because it's always nice to see one. So, jobs. Rather than clicking visual with the source and target, you want to click visual with a blank canvas and you want to hit create. We'll call this one test 2. So the first thing I always do is name my job. And that's build it from scratch using nodes. So the source node is the AWS Glue data catalog. We want to get it from the test database. We want input customers, node properties, and I'm just going to call this source. Next thing we want actually is the same source again. So we're going to add another source this time. Name, we're going to call this one source 2, just so we know the difference. And actually, good practice, we'll name that one source 1. Node properties underscore source 1. So we have source 1 and we have source 2. Database test, we've only got one table, so we're forced to use it. Now, interestingly, as with other ETL tools, you cannot just join, i.e. connect these 2 data sources together if they have the same names. So we're going to do 2 things. We're going to drop a few columns and we're going to do a bit of renaming. So into transform, and we want applied mapping. We want this one to be the child of source 1. So node properties, parents is source 1. I want to click into applied mapping. We'll go to node properties and we'll call this one apply 1, just so we know what side we're going down. You want to click on transform. We're going to drop everything after last name. So start after last name and drop everything. Perfect. And then above this, we just want to type in underscore 1 at the end. And that's just so we know it's coming from number 1. I'm going to copy and paste this down for speed. Like this. Then, because we've got this one, I'm going to go the long way. Click off, just so I can show you again how to set up a child parent node. If you're on the data source and you do it, it will automatically become the child. But if you're off it, transform, apply mapping, click back onto it, node properties. We'll call this one apply underscore 2 for continuity. Parents is source 2 this time, and you can see that we're back and in the game. Click on the applied 2. Drop everything after last name, so these columns are no longer coming with us. We're getting rid of them at this transformation step. And this time, you guessed it, we want to call this one underscore 2. And then we just want to copy and paste that down for speed. And then we just want to check output schema if you want to see it. We've dropped the columns and we've got the underscore 2. Next thing we want to do is join these 2 things together. So it's a transform node again, and it's called join this time. And we want to hit enter. In terms of node properties, our parent nodes this time are apply 1 and apply 2. And you can see that we're going to join these 2 data sources together. We want to go into the transform and you want to add a condition. You want to do when customer ID 1 equals customer ID 2. Output schema looks like this, where all the customer 1 fields are first and all the customer 2 fields are together. And really the idea here is that we're just joining those 2 data sets together on the primary key. But fundamentally, looking at Glue Studio, what we actually are interested more in is how these nodes work. So we've got our source 1, we drop the fields, we change the name. We've got our source 2, we drop the fields, we change the names. We join them in the middle, and the thing we're missing is a place to put it all at the end, which is our target. So this time I'll show you how to do it quicker. If you actually highlight the join, you go target and you go S3, it automatically makes that the child. So because I had join highlighted and I went and added a target, it automatically makes that the child without having to do it through node properties. But we'll still change the name. So we'll go target and then data target properties, go find the S3 bucket we've been working out of, go into output, go to output 2, funny enough this time, and again, I keep doing that on the studio, highlight the radio button, hit choose, and then that should be us ready to go, apart from the job details. So in the job details, add a description if you want, but the critical thing here is to make sure you give it the role that has the permissions to run the job. So in the role, find that role that we created 20 minutes ago, add it. As I said, not to worry too much about that. Change this down to 2, so it's the cheapest way we can run it, and change the retries down to 1. And then you want to save. Just thinking about it, and it's created, then click run. And again, if we go back out to monitoring, you'll see that we have a 100% success rate. But again, the running job isn't there, so hard refresh the browser if you don't see it. Keep hard refreshing. You can see that we have the job off and running. You can click in again and see some information, but critically, I'm going to pause the video here. I'll keep hard refreshing every 30 seconds, and hopefully we'll end up with 2 in the success column when it's ran. Okay, and again, after about 2 minutes, it went successful, but I had the hard refresh to see it quickly. It's just one of those things that kind of bugs me out about Glue Studio at times, that it doesn't give you the updates automatically. So you can see this time we've got the 2 jobs succeeded. And again, if you want to see that data back into the AS3 bucket that we created at the top, go to output, go to output 2, and then this time I'm just going to highlight the first file rather, because that's how it works. And then go actions, query with S3 select, it's JSON, and you want to run SQL. Oh, sorry. You want to hit JSON, and then we'll go output CSV, and you want to run the query. And you can see that it found the data, and we have managed to join the rows together successfully, which is what we aim to do. So the last thing I want to show you is how you can use Glue Studio to write some custom code. The AWS videos, which I pointed out at the start, and again, if you want to go watch them, are down here. They do a custom join using PySpark, and they copy and paste the code in. And there's good reason they do that. It's because it's quite a long coding process. But I think there's an easier way using the Spark SQL, if you're familiar with the SQL language, to write some quick transformations. So I'm going to show you the custom elements, the 2 of them. I will show you the PySpark, but I won't do the code because it'll take too long. I'll actually show you the Spark SQL, and how to do a custom transformation using that. And we'll keep it simple just for speed in the demo. So again, we want to go jobs. We want to do a visual with blank canvas again. We want to go create. And we'll call this one naturally test 3. First thing we need then is a source. So we all know this by now. It's the source node. You click onto it. Node properties. We'll call this one source. Data source properties. We'll go test. And we want that one actual table that we've been using the entire time. Transformation. Type in custom. You can see there's 2. So this one is where the AWS demo, which is, as I said, is great. It does show you this one where they copy and paste hundreds of lines of code in, and you can get that code off GitHub on how to do it. And that's where you would enter PySpark code. I'll quickly click on it just to show. So there's the start of it, and then you'd start doing things like your defc.2df, and you can start doing things. But it would take you forever to type the code, so let's not do that today. You highlight it, and obviously you click remove. What we're going to do is with the Spark one, and it's quicker, or I think it's quicker. So I'm going to highlight. I am going to then choose my source again, and we'll give this a little name and call this custom. Good practice to name everything, and hit enter. So SparkQL, if you're not familiar with it, works like normal SQL, where our data coming in here is now able to be queried through a table called my data source. You can change the name here. So if I just wanted to call this customer, I could. And then I would need to change this to customer. It's able to be queried through Spark like this. So we're going to keep this simple. If we go to the output schema, we're going to just choose the first name. So if you just wanted the first name, it'd be in here. Star means everything if you're not familiar with the SQL language. But if I just put in one column, we'll get the one column out, which is first name. If we wanted another column, we do a comma. We go back in, we go to output schema, and let's say we just wanted last name. And we call that first name, last name. And that's how it works. And if you look at your output schema, it actually hasn't changed yet because it can't pick these things up automatically, but we'll end up with just first name and last name. So that's the custom side. And then of course we need a target. So again, we'll put our S3 bucket in, and don't forget, because I was on the node and clicked target, it becomes automatically that child node. We'll do the same as before. We'll leave it as JSON. We'll have no compression. We'll go to that S3 bucket that we've been using the entire time. We'll go in, we'll go to output, and we'll go to output 3. And I did the same thing again. Highlight it on the radio button and click close every time. Node properties, you can give it a name. So I'm just going to call this target. And then the same as before, even though we're using a custom one this time, nothing changes in job details. We go into job details. We give it that IAM role that we have been using the entire time. Glue Studio. Delete. Leave everything else up there. Do the same again, so it only costs us a few cents to 2. And number of retries will be 1. And what we want to do is save on the top right. Just thinking about it. And we're done. And then we want to click run. And that's the job off and running. Back into monitoring. Oh, again, it hasn't appeared. Let's do a hard refresh. And it's off and running. What I should add as well from the monitoring section where this is off and running as a bonus, if you want to rerun a job, you can, like the same job again. You just highlight it, you go actions, and you go view job, and then you click run when you're ready to go again. So you could run the same job twice, 3 times, or 4 times. Back, into monitoring, and what I'm going to do as usual is pause the video here, and then we'll pick it up once hopefully that goes green and we have 3 successful runs. Okay, again, I had the hard refresh that a couple of times, and eventually we got the 3 successful. So if you look at the graph, we've got 3 and successful. Quick look at the data again, just back into the S3 bucket, same process as before, to the output folder, highlight it, and then you want to go actions, select with S3. We're in JSON format, and then just run the query. And you can see that we brought back just the first and last name. So that custom transformation we did inside the job, where if I go actions, view job, you can see that the custom transformations here just brought out the first name and the last name. So also add, you can zoom in and out, and I'm just using my cursor to do that. And then once you're on the canvas, it's a click and drag motion. So that is everything for today inside Glue Studio. We did those 3 transformations where we did the kind of out of the box one, we did a custom workflow, and then I showed you how to do a custom transformation. As usual, I'll make all this information for free. Link down below in the description to my website, www.johnnychivers.co.uk. And until next time, guys, thanks for watching.